Kierkegaard would say that Freud still had pride, even though he lacked the creature consciousness of the truly analyzed man, that he had not fully served his apprenticeship in the school of anxiety. In Kierkegaard's understanding of man, the casus rei project is the Oedipus complex, and in order to be a man, one has to abandon it completely. From this point of view, Freud still had not analyzed away his Oedipus complex, no matter how much he and the early psychoanalysts prided themselves that they had. He could not yield emotionally to superordinate power, or conceptually to the transcendental dimension. He lived still wholly in the dimension of the visible world, and was limited by what was possible in that dimension only. Therefore all his meanings had to come from that dimension. Kierkegaard had his own formula for what it means to be a man. He put it forth as one that he called the knight of faith. This figure is the man who lives in faith, who has given over the meaning of life to his creator, and who lives centered on the energies of his maker. He accepts whatever happens in this visible dimension without complaint, lives his life as a duty, faces his death without a qualm. No pettiness is so petty that it threatens his meanings. No task is too frightening to be beyond his courage. He is fully in the world on its terms, and wholly beyond the world in his trust in the invisible dimension. It is very much the old pietistic ideal that was lived by Kant's parents. The great strength of such an ideal is that it allows one to be open, generous, curious, to touch other people's lives and enrich them and open them in turn. As the knight of faith has no fear of life and death trip to lay onto others, he does not cause them to shrink back upon themselves. He does not coerce them or manipulate them. The knight of faith represents what he might call an ideal of mental health, the continuing openness of life out of the death throes of dread. Put in those terms, the ideal of the knight of faith is surely one of the more challenging ideals put forth by Kierkegaard. It is contained in most religions in one form or another, although no one, I think, has described it with such length and talent as Kierkegaard. Like all ideals, it is a creative illusion meant to lead men on, and leading men on is not the easiest thing. As Kierkegaard said, faith is the hottest thing. He placed himself between belief and faith, unable to make the jump. The jump doesn't depend on man after all. There's the rub. Faith is a matter of grace. Religion is first an open hand to receive gifts, meaning grace, and then a closed hand to give them. One cannot give the gifts of the knight of faith without first being dubbed a knight by some higher majesty. The point that Kierkegaard drives at is that his life as a believing Christian is to be placed against Freud's and as an agnostic, meaning there is no balance sheet to draw. Who's to tally up which one caused others to shrink up more or to expand more fully? For every shortcoming that we can point to in Freud, we can find a corresponding one in Kierkegaard. If Freud can said to have erred on the side of the visible, then Kierkegaard would have erred on the side of the invisible. He turned away from life partly from his fear of life. He embraced death more easily because he had failed in his life. His life was not a voluntary sacrifice undertaken in free will, but a pathetically driven sacrifice. He did not live in the categories in which he fed.